Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Maisha Hutton, and I'm the Executive Director of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition. I am so excited to be part of this webinar today. Thank you all for joining us from all over the world for the launch of this new advocacy toolkit. The toolkit is entitled Youth Voices in Healthy Advocacy Spaces, a guide for youth advocating for the childhood obesity space. Today, our world is home to the largest generation of young people in history. In 2020, there were 1.21 billion individuals aged 15 to 24 years, and this is predicted to rise to 1.4 billion by 2065. Recognizing some of the deep-rooted inequalities and systemic flaws in today's societies, youth are becoming increasingly vocal about the essential role they must play in building a better world. In order to do this, we must ensure that they have the appropriate information and tools to be effective advocates. The youth arm of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, Healthy Caribbean Youth, and World Obesity Federation have joined forces to launch this new guide, developed for youth by youth. Today, you're going to meet the amazing young people who have worked together to create this tool, which we all hope will empower existing and new advocates to call for healthier environments. They will walk you through an overview of the childhood obesity global epidemic and existing policies, experiences of advocacy work from youth around the world to improve overall health, and they will provide an overview of the Youth Advocacy Guide. Right now, you'll see on your screen some housekeeping rules. The event will be recorded. Please use the Q&A function to post comments and questions. The recording and slides will be circulated after the webinar. So to get us started, I'd like to introduce, first of all, Margot Nouveau. She is the Senior Policy Manager at the World Obesity Federation, and she's going to share a presentation on childhood obesity around the world, a snapshot of the existing situation and policies. Over to you, Margot.
Great. Thank you very much, Maisha. So I'm just going to be quite brief with this presentation, but I just wanted to speak briefly about the childhood obesity epidemic around the world. So the World Health Organization has identified childhood obesity as one of the most serious public health challenges of the 21st century. And this is because the prevalence of childhood obesity has been consistently rising over the past decades. And now numbers are nearly doubling every 10 years and actually show absolutely no sign of slowing down. So in 2020, it was estimated that there were 158 million children between the ages of 5 and 19 years old living with obesity, and that number is actually projected to increase to 254 million by 2030. So following the 2012 World Health Assembly, member states agreed to 6 global nutrition targets for 2025, and among them, target number 4 called for a no increase in the prevalence of childhood obesity and overweight. And today, as it stands, no country is on track to meet the WHO targets for obesity by 2025, which was in fact modestly set at no increase in obesity. And I think it would be important for the future presentations in this webinar to just briefly explain what is obesity. So it is a chronic disease that independently contributes to poor health outcomes and mortality, but it also is a risk factor for a number of other chronic diseases such as cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and some forms of cancer. Childhood obesity also can impact a person's mental health and lead to lower levels of self-esteem and higher likelihood of being bullied. It also has psychological impacts, including poor body image, anxiety, stress, and depression. And it has psychosocial consequences, which can lead to the perpetuation of weight stigma, which is defined as negative behaviors and attitudes that are directed towards individuals only because of their weight. And all of this can also have an impact on child's educational situation with poor school attendance levels and poor school achievements. So a number of policies have been implemented across the world, including sugar-sweetened beverage taxes, front-of-pack labeling to regulate the food environment. There's also a number of countries that have adopted marketing policies and regulations. But in light of the ongoing trends, it is very clear that current interventions aren't working and that we need new, bold, and innovative actions. We also know that no single intervention applied alone or policy will be able to solve the childhood obesity epidemic. So what we really need to do is to promote interventions and policies that take a life course approach and include a number of stakeholders, including youth. As Maisha said, young people today are the largest generation of young people in history. And one thing that has happened in the past 18 months is that there has been a sense of realization of urgency among young people who are committed more than ever to engage in today's major global health challenges, recognizing the impact it will have on their lives today, but also in the future. And so as experts of their own lives, and also as the future generation of leaders in care, it is essential that they are involved in any program development, interventions, or policies focused on improving childhood obesity, which is why we have come together and decided to work on this toolkit, recognizing that there is a gap and that it was part of it was our responsibility to develop some tools to support young people who would want to join us in that fight as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Margot, for sharing the evidence, why we need to combat this issue and why young people need to be at the helm. Next, I'm really excited to introduce Darcy Williams, who's a program officer in child nutrition and food systems at UNICEF, and he's going to break down the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. What does that mean? What are the implications for the advocacy work for youth advocates? Over to you, Darcy.
Thank you, Maisha, for that lovely introduction, and good morning and good afternoon to all our fine participants from all around the world. My name is Darcy Williams, and I'm a program officer here at UNICEF HQ, where I am helping to develop our global program on the prevention of childhood overweight and obesity. I'd first just like to give a quick shout out to World Obesity Federation and the Healthy Caribbean Coalition for inviting me to talk today, but also for launching this amazing youth advocacy toolkit that's going to help younger generations join the fight against childhood obesity, a guide written by youth for youth. And, you know, a huge chunk of my work at UNICEF HQ is to kind of spark these youth advocacy movements for healthier food environments for kids around the world. And so this toolkit is very timely, and I'm excited to be here. But, you know, I think many of you are already on your journey of becoming powerful youth advocates in this space. So I'm just here today to reinforce the importance of framing our collective advocacy efforts within a powerful child rights lens. Before I give my remarks, though, I want everyone to open the Zoom chat, that chat you never use during these webinars. Please open it up. And I have a question for everyone. When thinking about why potentially using a child rights approach is so effective in childhood obesity advocacy, what's the one word that comes to mind? So what's that one word that you would describe how a child rights-based approach can be useful? So just toss that word in the chat box, please. Protection. I love it. Thank you, Pierre. I know there are at least 60 people. Awareness. Fantastic. Participation. Safety, obligation, duty, vulnerability. Absolutely. Yeah, amazing. And these are all true. Inclusion. And for me, that one word for me is irrefutable. And this idea that child rights are irrefutable goes back 30 years ago when world leaders made a historic commitment to the world's children by adopting the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, an international agreement on childhood. And the CRC has turned out to be one of the most widely ratified human rights treaties in history. Well, ratified all but one country. If you know which country has not yet ratified it, you can also toss that in the chat. And yep, USA, that's a conversation for another time, but all the other countries in the world have ratified it. So contained in this treaty is a profound idea, right? It's that children aren't just objects who belong to their parents and whom decisions are made, or adults in training. Rather, they are human beings and individuals with their own rights. And this legally binding treaty outlines children's rights, government's obligations, and the responsibility of non-state actors regarding children's fundamental human rights. But specifically, I want to highlight Article 24, where it explicitly states that countries who have ratified the CRC, again, every country but the US, must guarantee a child rights to highest attainable standard of health by combating disease and malnutrition. And this specific article, in addition to a few others that also enshrine the best interests of the child over all other considerations is where a strong case for the prevention of childhood overweight and obesity falls. This includes the case for healthier food environments where children are free from harmful corporate marketing practices and are guaranteed access to healthy and sustainable diets. We know that food environments and the communities that children are growing up in around the world are making it harder and harder for children to access, afford, and desire healthy diets. But this isn't for lack of wanting to. We know that fueled by a powerful food and beverage industry, the globalization of our food systems has supported this transition towards obesogenic food environments where unhealthy foods and beverages are now more available, convenient, cheaper, and promoted than ever before. And this has sparked a global shift towards unhealthy diets, which have become the major driver of childhood overweight and obesity around the world. These unhealthy food environments violate children's rights to adequate nutrition on a daily basis, and it demands action from governments who have ratified the CRC. A child rights-based approach to advocating for healthier food environments for children offers a powerful and universally applicable way to consider children as rights holders who are central to any policy discourse. And there are two defining elements of a child rights-based approach. One, it identifies children as rights holders and governments as corresponding duty bearers and works towards strengthening children's capacities to understanding and realizing their own rights and government's capacities to meet their obligations. And two, it emphasizes the standard and principles derived from international human rights treaties that should guide all policies that have potential to impact children. And so adopting a child rights-based approach when we advocate for the prevention of childhood overweight and obesity offers several benefits, including accountability, legitimacy, tinder for advocacy, and empowerment. Therefore, we must always remember to frame our youth-led advocacy with a child rights lens. It makes our case that much more powerful on the ears of government, the duty bearers of these rights. It makes our advocacy irrefutable. So thanks so much for your time today. I'm really looking forward to the rest of this event and the wonderful upcoming speakers. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Darcy. Loving that energy. And I think the way you broke down the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the idea that children are rights bearers was brilliant. And we're now going to segue to Kimberly Benjamin. Kimberly is currently pursuing a master's in National Global Health Law at Georgetown University. And she's going to talk about the rights of children from a Caribbean perspective. Kimberly, let's hear.
Hi, everyone. First, I wish to extend a hearty congratulations to Healthy Caribbean Youth and to the World Obesity Federation for organizing today's event, and also for being the masterminds behind this exciting resource. It's well needed. So the title of my presentation, as you can see on screen, actually matches an article that I, along with Anissa Anderson, a fellow attorney at law in Barbados and Healthy Caribbean Youth member, co-wrote. The article was, in fact, inspired by the 2020 WHO, UNICEF, and Lancet Commission, which asks a future for the world's children. And I found the question to be very provocative because when you think about it, many of the crises or challenges facing children today are largely preventable, from climate change to conflicts, even childhood obesity. So my presentation takes a look at children's rights in the Caribbean, notably their right to health and corresponding rights. Next slide, please. All member states of the CARICOM community, which is really just a regional integration for those who may not be familiar with it, have ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child that Darcy was just speaking about. That means they have formally indicated their intention, their commitment to be bound by the provisions of that treaty. And as Darcy explained, that treaty sets out in robust manner the rights of children everywhere. So the Caribbean states' obligations under the CRC are binding. They must respect, they must protect, they must fulfill the child's right, including the right to health. And due to time constraints, I'll just mention in particular the obligation to protect. Because under that obligation, states must prevent food and beverage industries, third parties from interfering with children's rights, including their right to health. So the future of the Caribbean's children, at least on paper, looks really bright, right? But let's look more closely at why this little girl on screen may be squinting when she looks at her bright future. Next slide, please. So at paragraph 47 of general comment number 15 of 2013, which is really just a non-binding, which is non-binding in itself, but provides interpretive guidance for the very much binding Article 24 that Darcy spoke of under the CRC, states should address obesity in children. And it goes on to explain that children's exposure to fast foods should be limited. Marketing focused on children of unhealthy substances should be regulated, and the availability in schools should be controlled. So, all CARICOM member states having ratified the CRC, we should be well on our way to realizing children's right to health. And don't get me wrong, the Caribbean has displayed sporadic bouts of leadership in this field. They've made significant strides in some aspects of the NCD agenda. For example, I recently conducted a mapping exercise of school nutrition policies in the Caribbean. So we have policies in Bermuda, in the Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Grenada. However, my mapping exercise revealed that there are still significant gaps. None of those existing policies actually address marketing of unhealthy food products to children in school settings. And so my point here is that action in one area does not justify inaction in others. And action that is manipulated or delayed or even undermined by corporate interest must be called out. The truth is that there has been little movement to introduce the cost-effective, evidence-based WHO best buys that require regulatory or legal action, such as restricting or banning marketing of unhealthy products to children. So states are accountable and may be accountable for inaction. I actually like how the former UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health put it. He said that violations of the obligation to protect can come from omissions, such as the failure to regulate the activities of corporations to prevent them violating the rights of health of others, and the failure to protect consumers. And that is an important point. And like, as Darcy said, and I couldn't agree more, the human rights framing of our advocacy work is critical because states are accountable for their omissions, their failures to act. As it relates to the children's best interests, Article 3 of the CRC recognizes the best interest of the child as a primary consideration. That is a whole discussion on its own. But then general comment number 15 that I referenced earlier helpfully explains and urges states to place children's best interests at the center of all decisions affecting their health and development. So I submit that school environments where children spend 1/3 of their time represents the child's work and play space. The child's interests should take precedence, really, over any corporation's interests or any other interest for that matter. We have, in the Caribbean, we have workplace health and safety laws and regulations in many jurisdictions in the Caribbean. And yet there's nothing or very little or not complete policies to protect children in their work and play spaces. We need to think about that some more. And regarding participation, we definitely have our work to do as advocates, and our participation in policymaking spaces, which concerns us, I'm saying should be as of right. The CRC itself in Article 3 speaks of states assuring the child who is capable of forming his or her views the right to express those views. Within the Caribbean context, and perhaps elsewhere too, because we have others on the call from elsewhere, this may seem strange since growing up, well, at least in the Caribbean, we're often told that we should be seen and not heard. And I'm probably out of time now, but I want to close by just reiterating, and we can move to the next slide, but just by reiterating the value of the toolkit being launched today. It has the potential for those who are new to the advocacy space to find their voices. Especially those voices which might have been silenced for so long. So our voice, the youth voice, in advocating for healthier environments, especially school environments, is critical. And a future for the Caribbean's children, I say yes. No more squinting. We can reimagine this future and we can work at it. So youth advocates, we've got this.
Thanks, Kimberly. That was great. And a lovely introduction as we introduce Claudia Celine Batts, and she is the Policy and Projects Coordinator at the World Obesity Federation. And she's also a core team member of Young Leaders for Health. Claudia is going to introduce you to the toolkit. Claudia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Maisha, for the kind introduction, and to our amazing speakers on the line to us today and participants. Today, I'm delighted to be here to present our guide, a roadmap for young people to explore the world of advocacy, with an overview of the importance of youth voices and practical strategies, but also guidance that can be used for you to carry out your advocacy both online and in person. Next slide, please. Just to quickly introduce you to the toolkit team, everyone that you can see on the screen at the moment on that screen has been extremely pivotal in the development of this resource. We are advocates with backgrounds in global health, law, healthcare management and prevention, nutrition, and international comparative studies. Next slide, please. As organizations, we've both been working, both the World Obesity Federation and Healthy Caribbean Coalition, on solidifying a strategy for youth engagement and to build a network of youth advocates. And whilst the Healthy Caribbean Coalition has its youth arm, World Obesity has recently been engaging in projects that work directly with youth. We also have Healthy Voices, our platform, our youth capacity building platform, and recently launched a youth-driven podcast series, Youth Voices for Healthy Choices. A year ago, we got together and we agreed that to drive progress forward, we must get together and to achieve our common vision of developing a coalition to advocate for NTD-related policies. To date, we've had a lot of difficulty finding resources that are appropriate for childhood obesity-related advocacy. So our objectives in creating this toolkit are twofold. First of all, we want to build advocates' capacity for advocacy so that they can represent their own respective organizations and/or individual focuses confidently and effectively. We also want to allow for the sharing of experiences and create a space for regional and international collaboration. Next slide, please. We engaged in an agile development process, so working with youth to both plan, develop, and review the toolkit. So initially, we went to seek feedback from youth and allies working in this space, representing youth organizations on the outline and the content. To bring it to life, we also decided that it would be extremely pivotal to conduct a series of interviews to assess the answers to the questions that you can see on the right. So we felt it was really important to understand both the barriers and motivations to engaging in advocacy. While the interviews are not representative of the whole population, they gave us really useful insights. Next slide, please. Here are some of the themes that emerged. So we found that the nature of policy change and implementation can often be a barrier to engaging in advocacy. As you all know, that it's often quite slow to see policy change and can be demotivating at times, especially when you don't see the impact of what you're striving to achieve. Those small wins can be extremely, extremely important. We also found that managing conflicting priorities and political events such as natural disasters and COVID-19, and rightfully so, can shift priorities across the globe. Other barriers included limited and inadequate communication and language barriers, and financial and time constraints, and a lack of training and support for young persons. I personally resonate with the next point, and motivations to participate in advocacy can often be driven by lived experiences and the interest and desire to give back to community, family, and friends. It was also interesting to identify that having research experience is a useful tool as it gives you a really in-depth understanding of the problem at hand. Last but not foremost, having access to youth networks, platforms, and institutions that can support change can be a clear motivator. Next slide, please. So who is this guide for? I really want to reiterate that whilst this guide is focused on childhood obesity prevention, the key principles and the step-by-step processes that we outline are applicable to a diverse audience of youth interested in different topics and at different stages of their journey. So this toolkit is for youth that have not had any previous experience maybe in this space and are interested in getting started. Also for youth who want to know more about successful strategies to strengthen their existing work, or youth allies who are really keen to explore ways to support youth on their journeys. Next slide, please. So in the toolkit, we start off by defining what advocacy is. This is surprisingly hard to define, and you often, well, in my case, necessarily, I did not know that I had stepped into this place until quite later down the line. We also heard from my colleague Margot about childhood obesity trends globally and the cause for concern. So in the first section, we thought it was, we dispelled some common myths around childhood obesity and why youth play a central role in shaping the health and well-being of future generations. Young people have a lot of power, both as consumers and voters, and as future policymakers, business leaders, and heads of state. Young people have such an instrumental role in shaping policies that they need to feel empowered to act. To succeed, we also think it's really important to take the time to develop a plan to advocate. So understanding your local context, determining the focus and your goal of your advocacy, so defining really clear objectives, and also understanding tools and related messaging that you can use to target your audience and essentially what they see and hear. We also so in the developing your advocacy plan section, we take you step by step through this process using frameworks and checklists to support you. It's also, I just want to reiterate that whilst with with advocacy, it's also possible if you don't have access to funding. So nowadays, digital advocacy such as writing op-eds, blogs, and participating in online events such as today's is a really great resource and use of time and effort. In the case studies section, then we move on to share some inspiring stories by advocates who are already doing work in this place. Some of them you can see on the screen. I wanted to reiterate one example from our colleagues at Bite Back, who are unfortunately not here with us today, but they have been campaigning here in the UK extensively for healthier food environments. And as a result, the UK government will be introducing, and first in the world, may I point, restriction on junk food advertisements in spring 2022. So a few examples of existing declarations and calls to actions to spark some inspiration. We have the Co-Create Youth Declaration that was adopted on World Children's Day last year, with youth chosen and developed ideas to address the obesity epidemic. You'll be hearing from Mafalda Gonzalez on the call soon, who will share more insights into this as well. Also, you can see some of the Healthy Caribbean Youth's work. So last year, they published an open letter to the Prime Minister of Barbados, and recently have been engaging with Dr. Tedros, Director General of the World Health Organization, amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's really great to see that they're actually electing youth nominations for their youth council at this moment. And as for days of action on the screen, as I've pointed out, there's World Obesity Day, which is really important to make the most of those opportunities where we're galvanizing a community who are also acting at the same time. Next slide, please. So just to finish off, I want to share a few opportunities for you to get involved and learn more. So we have Healthy Voices, as I alluded to before, that you're more than welcome to visit to support you in learning, discussing further. Also, I'd encourage you to check out the Stop and Co-Create project that is working with young people on childhood obesity prevention. And I'm sure our colleagues from the Healthy Caribbean Coalition can put the link to their Healthy Caribbean Youth website in the chat so you can see the amazing work that they've been doing in advocacy and capacity building. Next slide, please. I just wanted to end with this quote that you can see on the screen, and to thank everybody involved in the toolkit development process, from the toolkit team, the reviewers, and everyone that has been brought us here today. Thank you again.
Hi, Claudia. Thank you for sharing a closer look at the toolkit with us. So we've heard about why we need this toolkit. We know about the burden of childhood obesity. We know about the importance of the child's rights framing and how that's impacted advocacy in the Caribbean. And we've taken a closer look at the toolkit, its development, the focus, the aim, and its intended outcome. Now I'm going to invite Danielle Walwyn. She's our advocacy officer at Healthy Caribbean Coalition and also the lead of Healthy Caribbean Youth. And she's going to moderate a panel discussion with youth advocates who are going to share their experiences advocating for issues which are close to their heart. Danielle, welcome.
Thanks, Maisha, and hello to everybody. thank you, Claudia, especially for the overview of that toolkit. It was really such a pleasure working with you and the rest of the team. It's really quite wonderful to be here a year later. The toolkit's developed, we're here at this launch. And so before we begin the panel, I just wanted to say again that this was really a collective effort. The toolkit is filled with lessons learned from all of us as young advocates and others who are not part of the actual core team. And I think based on Claudia's overview, we all have our own lived experiences and reasons for entering the space. I think some of us can definitely resonate with some of the barriers and facilitators that Claudia would have mentioned. And so right now, I'm really excited to be facilitating this part of the event, where we're going to have 4 inspiring young advocates tell us a bit more about their advocacy journey, and as Maisha said, things that are very close to their heart. And so today you would have met 2 of our fabulous panelists before, but I'm going to reintroduce them. Today we have Mafalda Gonçalves, who's from Portugal, medical student, dedicated to change the world and create a healthier environment for children. She's also a member of Co-Create Youth Alliance and a core member of the Co-Create Youth Task Force. So welcome, Mafalda. We have Mr. Pierre Cook Jr., who's a Healthy Caribbean Coalition's Youth Technical Advisor, youth advocate, law student, fierce defender of children and human rights. Welcome, Pierre. We have Kimberly Benjamin, who we just heard from, super passionate about children's rights, as you would have heard. She's a Healthy Caribbean Youth member and lawyer. And we had Darcy Williams, again, super passionate. We heard from him earlier today. And he is, as he would have mentioned, program officer at UNICEF. So welcome, panelists. Super excited to be talking to you today. So just to start us off, we really want to hear from you. What work are you doing in this space? And so to start us off, I'm going to ask Mafalda. What work are you doing in this space, Mafalda?
So first, I just wanted to say good afternoon to everybody. Thank you, Danielle, for the amazing introduction. I'm very excited to be here and to talk about this issue with such an amazing group of people. And so I'll just tell a bit of my story. So I started, now I'm a member of the Co-Create Youth Task Force, and I'm here to represent the Co-Create Youth Task Force. But my journey started here in Portugal in a small alliance that was constituted by my group of scouts. And we started this project, so the Co-Create project, by identifying some problems that we know existed in our community that were related to health and physical activity, so well-being in general. And then we tried to find solutions to those policies. Then they eventually asked who wanted to join the task force. That was something that was in a more European level, and I thought it would be a very good opportunity to know more about this issue and the problems that we had to solve. So I ended up joining, and with an amazing group of people, of young people from different countries, such as UK, Norway, Poland, and Portugal even. So we also discussed the several problems that we needed to find in the different countries, and find out 4 different policies that we think that should be implemented in the European Union. And so we came up with the Co-Create Youth Declaration that Claudia mentioned earlier. And if you have interest to read it, it's available in the Healthy Voices platform. And now we are trying to promote the declaration because it's something that we are very proud of. And we think that helps fight some of the problems that we identified.
Awesome, thanks, Mafalda. I know it's a year since the declaration was released, so it's extra special. And so I really like how you highlighted that it all starts, and I think we can all resonate on the panel here with just a group of curious, passionate young people about a particular issue. Pierre, I know that might probably resonate with you. So Pierre, what about you? What are you up to in this space?
Thank you very much, Danielle. I think just to start off, the engagement or my step into the field of advocacy didn't really start in such a formal way. It was more so, you heard about these conversations at home, and you're exposed to certain discussions through your family, and then church reiterated some of these messages. And so the formal opportunity only came in about 2017, 2018 through the Healthy Caribbean Coalition. And really it was an attempt and effort to get the youth on board and hear from the youth directly. And that was because of a specific interaction of me making a point saying, we want to do these policies, we want to put these provisions in place, we want to curb childhood obesity. How many of these conversations have we had with the youth? How many times have we had the youth as a part of the planning and processing before we put it out there? And just a little after that, we had Sir Trevor Hassan reach out, and he was like, "Here, we need you on board." And then Maisha was like, "We need you to get involved." And since then, I have grown by leaps and bounds in terms of advocating for the protection of the rights of children to health. And currently, I'm at a space where I continue to share those messages both regionally and internationally. And I try to tie those messages in with law student, just to make sure that there's a protection of their rights and taking a rights-based approach, which is why this toolkit is particularly important to me. And some of the things that I guess I'm currently engaging in is trying to develop and build the capacity of more youth in this space. So there's the HCY team, Healthy Caribbean Youth, where we work with young people across the region to build their capacity as health advocates, and whether you're related to the health field or the built environment. And then beyond Healthy Caribbean Youth, the Healthy Caribbean Coalition is also putting on a series of projects. Right now we're in the middle of, or now more than ever, Protect Our Children campaign. And that's basically around sharing messages about, ensuring that the environments that children are exposed to don't have things like, predatory marketing and healthy access to food. And then there's a wider forum group that we'll see developing pretty soon that engages, again, that conversation of health and law. And I think that's where my niche area is, trying to find that balance and make that connection between health and law so that we can push more for advocacy. We mentioned it before, Darcy did a brilliant job of pointing it out. Our countries have signed on to the Conventions of the Rights of the Child, or countries have signed on to international conventions, but there's a gap of political will, policy, or legislation between those international commitments and then what is actually in place at a national level. And that's what I want to do. I want to be able to bring those messages to the front of government, to their face, and say, we are making these demands, these are our actions. And it's the type of engagement, the type of advocacy I hope to see from youth advocates and anyone who's benefiting from this.
Thanks, Pierre. And you always end with that multi-sectoral collaboration that we need, building on the synergies and prioritizing that. And I have to go back to where you started with your story, Pierre, and give a huge kudos to Maisha, Sir Trevor, and all other allies who build this platform for us as young people. I think all of us on the panel can speak to one leader and organization who paved the way for us to be here as youth advocates and continue to support us. So huge kudos to all of our allies. And Kimberly, over to you and your space. I know you and Pierre kind of relate on that legal space and intertwining between health and legal. Over to you.
Yes, I love hearing Pierre's story. It's fascinating. But in my case, I was also a law student doing courses on international human rights and so on, and even Commonwealth Caribbean human rights, and just questioning, why aren't we talking about the right to health, within this academic setting when we're talking about these rights? Because I knew that NCDs was one of the major challenges facing our region. And so in particular, there was this one lecturer, Nicole Foster, and I would bug her, say, what about the right to health? And this was before I even knew what the scope or the content of that right was. I just felt like it was something that we in the Caribbean region needed to be talking about. And she then introduced me to Healthy Caribbean Coalition. And I actually started many moons ago working, Maisha had asked me to do some work on the childhood obesity prevention scorecard. And so that's where I got started. And funny enough, in some recent work that I was doing for Healthy Caribbean Coalition, I came full circle back to the COP scorecard, because I used it to start off my research as I was doing some work on a policy and legislative guidance tool for the region. And so I would say that my advocacy work is really desk-based research that focuses on kind of childhood obesity prevention and management. And I enjoy it because I don't particularly like public speaking, but the research allows me to really get my head in and to do what I like to do, research and to write. And yeah, I'm thrilled. That's why I'm thrilled about this new resource that Healthy Caribbean Coalition has launched along with World Obesity Federation today. because it's important, and as Darcy mentioned, to look at it through the human rights lens. And I would say as well, my advocacy work has led me to being part of a Caribbean Public Health Law Forum, which was launched this year as well. And so that is important regarding the legal aspects. So combining law and health, and what it really is this network of attorneys and health practitioners, civil society organizations, academia within the Caribbean space, getting together and talking about these issues, and not only talking about them, but advancing these issues in the Caribbean. So yeah, come full circle through the years to that space, which I think is critical and we need to have more of in the region.
Thanks so much for that, Kimberly. And I think one of the things that you highlighted, which I hope our young advocates on the call will remember, is that advocacy looks so different. So you can even hear just from our panelists so far about their experiences. So it's not just presenting on webinars, as Kimberly saying, it's that integral research work that might be going on in the background. So thanks for that, Kimberly. Darcy, over to you. What are you up to in this space?
Thanks so much, Danielle. And I have to say, I'm really happy that I came much earlier in the program before Kimberly and Pierre, because they're much more eloquent when they speak about the child rights-based approach. So I think most of you know UNICEF is relatively new to this space, and we're built not new to the youth advocacy space, but we're new to the prevention of childhood overweight obesity world, because about only 3 years ago it was integrated in our nutrition strategy. So it's really a small team of us building this program from the ground up, and part of my job is to really make sure young people are always having a seat at the table, and we're bringing youth voices into every event that we do. To give you a few examples, like we have a really amazing partnership building with Bite Back 2030 in the UK, where we're always making sure that their leaders have a speaking position at our big global events, and we're putting them front and center because they are the prime example of what happens when youth are driving advocacy efforts. And we have big plans with them, with more on that to come. And then also when we're developing our foundational sets of tools, we're making sure that youth contribute to that. So Pierre was really amazing and contributed a video to our e-learning module on the prevention of childhood overweight obesity. And we had at least 3 other young people involved in that. So it's about, in this stage of what UNICEF is doing, is making sure that we're integrating youth every step of the way. And then some other interesting spaces, working with young, doing youth workshops with young health advocates in Australia, Europe, and America on how they envision healthier food retail spaces. So working with them through the co-create model, shout out to co-create, EAT, World Obesity Federation, and Mafalda, because I know she's also a co-create queen. And we're working with these youth workshops to then develop policy asks directly from young people to food retailers to be like, yo, these are your customers of today and tomorrow, and they're going to come for you if you don't have healthy products and ethical promotion tactics. So for us, there's every day, there are a lot of moving pieces, but it's really in making sure we're integrating youth at every step of the way. And then having this very core commitment that youth advocacy is the most powerful advocacy. And we've seen it in everything, the climate crisis and anti-racism work, and we're going to see it now in the food justice space and healthier food environments.
Love that. Youth advocacy is the most powerful. Thank you for that, Darcy. And again, kudos to UNICEF for integrating young people every step of the way. We know that that's the most meaningful way to do it, not just at the end, throughout the process. So thank you for that, and kudos. And we also have our regional UNICEF team. I guess UNICEF across the board is doing those same things. So thanks for that. At this point, we've heard a little bit more about our panelists and their stories. And so now I'm really interested to hear about some barriers that they've encountered across their advocacy journeys or relevant projects and how they have overcome them. So Mafalda, turning over to you.
So as we were writing the declaration, we did a lot of dialogue forums to see if the policies that we were building were easy to implement, or if they were based on the right things. And one thing that I will never forget is that when we were discussing the marketing one, the policy related to marketing, there was one participant that said, because this, maybe it's better if I explain the policy. So we want to restrict marketing to children under the age of 18. So for instance, when they were watching cartoons or something like that, big companies or that tend to marketing around unhealthy food wouldn't be able to do that in that space of time. And then I remember that one of the participants said, well, trying to define what's unhealthy, it's a very tricky thing, because you can't just say like, oh, if it has this amount of sugar isn't healthy, or if it has this amount of salt isn't healthy. No, it's very difficult to do that. And from that moment, we realized there are a lot of blind spots when trying to implement a policy or building a policy. And something that we did from that moment, and we are still trying to do, is work and work and work to get those policies blind spot free. So very polished, and so that people can look at them and say, okay, there's nothing impossible to do around here. And other barrier that we encountered is sometimes that we feel we are not heard enough. So, and it makes the roads a bit hard, because we are doing our best, we are taking our time to build this better future. And sometimes it's hard because adults they say we are important, but at the same time, they don't listen to us. So it's kind of contradicting. But then we just have to keep reminding ourselves that we are doing something that we like, and that even if it's just for a bit, we are trying to create something. So I guess that is wonderful to feel that we are making a difference.
Anisha Armafalda, thanks so much for that. And I think going back to Darcy's comment, youth advocacy being the most powerful. So I think we just have to, as youth advocates on the call and those listening in, definitely have to keep that in mind. And we can learn from you. I'm just thinking about the Caribbean and your efforts on that policy. Marketing is huge for us, marketing to children. So we can definitely learn from you, and we're looking forward to the outcomes from Co-Create and all your projects moving forward. Pierre, over to you. One barrier that you've faced and how you've overcome it.
Yeah, I think there's some barriers that we as youth advocates may not have the resources to overcome, and we have to depend on other persons to come to that paradigm shift. And I'll get to that, but I think one of the key barriers is financing. Getting access to resources, to put on projects, to engage in advocacy. Many persons hear about youth advocacy and hear about your work, and they think, well, it's so fun, it's so nice, it's great that you're doing this work, but no one sees the hidden costs to put in that work on. No one understands that behind the webinars, behind the sessions, there's hours of research, there's a critical amount of time put into developing your speaking points, going out there and building your portfolio, making sure that you build your personal capacity. So the resources is difficult, and it may not only be financial resources in the terms of access to funding, but even to capacity building opportunities or to organizations that are willing to help support your advocacy. That is a difficult process. And I think what you'll find in the toolkit as well is that you'll see that even if you don't have access to finances, there's ways to get around your advocacy and make sure it still works. And also how to build on synergies and collaborations. Just this morning, I was a part of a panel where we talked about the importance of cross-sector synergies and collaboration. So it's the idea behind the Healthy Caribbean Coalition. It's the idea behind Healthy Caribbean Youth. It's the idea behind the Healthy Voices, because you bring together youth, you bring together persons from different backgrounds and help them to connect their messages to push for the protection of health. And Darcy, I'm happy to see that UNICEF again is coming on board about the protection of the rights of children to health, particularly around the obesogenic environment, because we need that type of increased international support to get the work done. And that type of support will help with the initial challenge that I pointed out, shifting attitudes. We still have persons who are uncomfortable with young persons speaking out. We still have persons who don't think that this is as important a topic. And for example, many governments, even when they're running their campaigns now, may not include health as one of their major policies. They may not include the protection of the rights of children to health as one of their major landmark initiatives for their manifestos. But I suspect, and I hope to see, that after the COVID-19 pandemic, that we have more of that inclusion of, if I am elected, I will do such and such in relation to health and the protection of health. And hopefully we have citizens demanding from their representatives that they make provisions for the protection of health. So the barriers to resources, both financial and personnel-wise, capacity building-wise, the difficulties in terms of, or the solution rather, in terms of building synergies. And then finally, that point of challenging some archaic attitudes to advocacy, particularly youth advocacy. They're very fine with politicians doing it. They're very fine with the older people doing it. But the minute, Greta Thunberg or someone who should be in school starts to speak up, it's seen as inappropriate and they're doing too much and you just take their place as a child. Those are some of the barriers I face. And in overcoming them, these conversations, these toolkits to empower young people, these are the ways to overcome them. And this type of interaction is starting that fight or changing or shifting this.
Totally agree, Pierre, and thank you for that call. And you're having support, I think, from allies and youth in the chat as well about that meaningful engagement at those policy-making levels. Kimberly, over to you. One barrier and how you've overcome that particular barrier.
There's so many barriers, but one that comes to mind is, I would say, the information barrier. And what do you mean, Kimberly? But basically, accessing key documents I'm speaking from the Caribbean context, sometimes it's difficult. And I found this when I was working on the policy and legislative guidance for regulating the availability and marketing of unhealthy food products in schools that I worked on last year. I knew that policies existed for some of the territories, but actually finding the documents online or in a public space, that is a challenge. And yes, Healthy Caribbean Coalition has done an amazing job with the COP scorecard that I mentioned. But again, we are reliant on access to those documents. So I think the information access barrier is a significant one. Within my work, how I sought to overcome that information deficit, I would call it, is that I did several interviews with policymakers on the ground or persons from the ministries of health or ministries of education across the region who were available. I mean, the COVID-19 context at the time when I was working on the project made it difficult to reach out to some persons. So that was an additional barrier. But I would say being able to have those critical conversations with persons who were either part of the design or part of the implementation process for those policies was helpful to overcome. So I think we have to do a better job in the Caribbean region at ensuring that those critical documents are available to the public, because it is important for advocates to have access to conduct mapping exercises, to identify gaps, to be able to suggest solutions or ways to fill those gaps within our context. And I'll stop there in the interest of time. Thank you.
Thanks, Kimberly. So that act of transparency, I know that's something that we continue to talk about. So thank you for that, and thank you for your work. Turning over to Darcy. Darcy, one barrier and how you've overcome it.
Thank you. I think there are multiple, but if I had to choose one, it's probably this, like, battling the tokenization and creating spaces where experts really want to be challenged by young people. Because there's a lot of topics in this space of childhood obesity that's very taboo for, like, the more traditional, mainly white, mainly male, mainly North American, mainly European experts that need to be challenged a little bit on how we, talk about lived experiences of child obesity and how we want to push advocacy spaces in certain directions. And one example of where I think we did a good job at kind of overcoming that barrier is, again, making sure at this at the Global Obesity Forum, we gave a prime speaking role to this phenomenal young woman called Evelyn Monet. And she came and she just brought the house down in making, it was a session about changing the narrative. And she, like, rooted it so well in social justice and body positivity and racial justice. And you could see like things starting to click in people's minds about, oh, maybe this is a better way of framing the narrative around how we want to prevent childhood obesity. And, afterwards, when we're creating the final document, just make of like kind of the overall summary of this event, making sure those pieces of information from those young people are actually integrated into the final thing. And they weren't just there to speak and sound fancy and everyone's like, oh, yay, congrats, you had a young person, but actually, integrating their ideas. And so thanks to her, we have the word social justice in basically the constitution for the Global Obesity Coalition. And so it's kind of prepping those environments where experts are willing to be challenged by young people.
Thank you, Darcy. And in the interest of time, I am going to end the panel. We could be talking for so much longer. It's been such a fantastic panel. Thanks to all of you. And just to end, I would love for each of you to give a statement. What is your vision for the future? And Mafalda, we'll start with you.
Maybe I would say just more young people getting involved and, I don't know, advocate for what they believe.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mafalda. Pierre?
I'm trying to think of a single statement. I want to see more inclusion, more capacity building, meaningful engagement. That's the word. I want to see more meaningful engagement. Darcy, you said something that made me praise dance a little bit in my room. Just talking about tokenism, meaningful engagement. That's what I want to see. And that will include, paying youth for their work, making sure there's access to resources, making sure there's capacity. Meaningful engagement, I think, covers it all. Yeah.
Thank you, Pierre. And Kimberly?
I'll go to something I said coming into this. Youth need to be at the decision-making tables where unmuted microphones and attentive ears point in their direction. And hands and feet of allies are ready to take action, not only for them, but with them.
Thank you, Kimberly. And Darcy?
Again, Pierre and Kimberly killing it, and Mafalda too. I will say Pierre hit the nail on the head with the paying young people for their time. It's like we're all being paid to be here. Young people need to also be paid to be at the table. And I think a vision would be a world where youth advocacy movements have the financial backing to make the change that they want to see.
Thank you, Darcy, and thank you to the panelists. I think there are a number of calls to action there for allies, for policymakers. So thanks to the panelists for your powerful words. I'm inspired, I'm hoping, and I'm thinking everybody else is inspired as well. And with that, I'm gonna turn over to Maisha for closing comments. Thanks all.
Thanks, Danielle. I mean, I'm always so humbled to listen to you young people. I've always been committed from the time I started in this role to engaging and putting young people at the forefront of what we do. Someone gave me an opportunity when I was quite young, and I appreciate it, and I'm passing it on. I think for me, I'd like to answer that question about what I would like to see. And in particularly in this area of childhood obesity, I really want to see a groundswell of young people advocating for healthy food environments as part of healthy food systems, as part of connected climate change action. And so I see you all as leaders in this movement. I want to close with words from those of you who designed the toolkit and put together this amazing resource. So I'm going to hand over to the toolkit architects to give you a final word, and then we're going to close with a video from World Obesity Federation. And the video is entitled Youth Voices for Planetary Health. So over to the toolkit authors for the final word.
Thanks, Maisha. I'm going to invite all of our toolkit authors on board. Just a quick word from me, and it's to our allies. Again, thank you for continuing to pave the way for us as young advocates and helping us execute our double and triple duty actions. We know we have a lot facing our world right now, and we thank you for all the support that you've given us and continue to give us. I think our panelists had quite a number of calls to action. So thank you to our allies.
I think to just go on what Danielle just said, I want to say thank you to everyone who helped us develop this toolkit and to an excellent panel session. I think it's very clear that youth are social actors and grounded in the Convention of the Rights of the Child. And so it is everyone's responsibility to truly ensure that they are given a meaningful place at the table, not just in a tokenistic manner. And I think that also comes from making sure that we have some tools available for everyone. And I am quite confident with all of the amazing young people that helped us to develop this toolkit, that this will be a great tool for current but also future advocates.
Thank you, Margot. I'd just like to reiterate the comments already and just say thank you to the amazing team and everyone involved in designing this toolkit. Just to answer a question in the chat box, the toolkit will be available on the Healthy Caribbean Coalition website in the coming days, and we will be sharing the link. But just I wanted to reiterate that each conversation is a step in the right direction, and they're always new. You're going to engage in sort of uncomfortable conversations, and I think what we're doing today, coming together, building networks and coalitions of youth advocates, is a really important step to both make the journey also sort of fun as well, and to sort of sustain that momentum.
I think I'll jump in now. I just wanted to say that to the persons who really helped us with reviewing the document and giving critical feedback, thank you so much. And I think it's really helped us to put together a document that we're proud of and we're comfortable with, and something that we can trust is for you and for you. And it's really, without that intervention and without your support, we couldn't have gotten it done. And I really want to say to the youth advocates on the call, when you're reading that toolkit and you're looking at that toolkit, feel empowered to know that you have the ability and the capacity to do right, to call for change and call to action. And this is the best time to do it. This is the best time to do it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to piggyback off of Pierre's comment. First, thank WOF and HCC for the opportunity to even put this together. And again, to the youth advocates, now is the time for us to kind of put ourselves out there and say what matters to us in a way that it shows how much it matters to us. I think especially when we talk about the childhood obesity space in the Caribbean, especially, we tend to be like, but no, this affects us for all sorts of reasons: climate change, food justice, like Darcy mentioned. Transforming our food system is now a buzzword, and so this is why we need to transform our food systems to better manage the way we eat, to protect our children, like Kimberly mentioned, so that they're not squinting when they look forward. So again, thank you for the opportunity. To everyone who helped with the toolkit, thank you, and we hope you guys use it.
Malnutrition, including undernutrition, nutritional deficiencies, and obesity, could cost society up to $3.5 trillion per year if nothing is done. Adapting food systems to be more sustainable and to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions has the potential to both reduce premature deaths worldwide and to support healthier diets. Young people around the world are taking these issues into their own hands.
Ensure that the transition to more sustainable and ecologically friendly food systems is done in a fair and just way.
Prioritize and promote sustainable and nutritious food options for all.
Create an environment where nutritious, delicious, low-cost food is available in every rural market for every farming family.
Give greater attention to the effects of climate change on small island developing states.
To champion healthy, sustainable diets, both in catering and in the agenda to fight climate change.
Actively promote plant-based diets through incentives that encourage people to reduce animal products in their diets by making alternatives more accessible and more affordable.
to give space to people most affected by the climate crisis, not to polluters who want to keep the system as it is, and to protect the right to protest across the world, because we have a right to protest for our planet.
Food systems are not only failing our planet, but they're failing our children. That's why we're calling on leaders at COP26 to take urgent action to transform food systems so that they begin to deliver on children's right to good nutrition while also safeguarding our planet's future. Governments, civil society, and private sector must prioritize the specific nutritional rights, needs, and aspirations of children if we're to end all forms of child malnutrition, while also reducing our food system's impact on the climate crisis.
The climate crisis and unhealthy food systems have the same drivers and solutions. Fiscal policies, front-of-pack food labeling, and marketing restrictions are effective tools to incentivize healthy and sustainable food systems and discourage the production and consumption of ultra-processed, unhealthy, and climate-damaging products.
The collective youth voices we've just heard from create a strong call to action for leaders at COP26 to recognise the synergies between food systems failures and climate change. These issues share many common drivers and must therefore be tackled through double-duty actions addressing both food systems failures and climate change. We call on leaders at COP26 to take decisive and effective actions to address both issues simultaneously. The time to act is now.